Nothing.
Let me know if you get them.
Oh, wow. Sorry about that. Okay. Let's start again. Sorry about that. Okay. Let's go back. Let's go back to the beginning of Ois Hey, age Yud Ches, and we were speaking about how low the Ein Sof reaches. It reaches all the way down to the worlds of Bria, Yitzira, Asiyah, and these three worlds of Bria, Yitzira, Asiyah, we are saying that they are as low as the everything reaches, the Ein Sof reaches that low, and that encompasses all the three levels in the worlds, the level of the Oilumis, which is the Chitzonius of the Chitzonius, and the Neshamis, which is the Pnimius of the worlds, and the Malachim, which is the Chitzonius, and the Malachim are the Shluchim, that through which the Yidden connect the worlds with Elikus. So now we're going to bring this all back to the topic that this mimer is about, primarily by explaining Ein Sof Lamata Aden Tachlis. It says, Zel in Ein Sof Lamata Aden Tachlis. That's what it says, that the Ein Sof, the infinite light of Hashem, is below to no end. The Koy ala Gilui by Spashtas B'chinas Ein Sof Ad Lamata Matam. It's referring to the revelation and the expansion of the Ein Sof till very much below. The Madregas Hayois Achronis Vayois Tachtonis in the most final, in the most last light, and the most lowest levels. What is considered the most final and lowest levels? In the worlds of Bia, they are considered below, and that's where the Ein Sof reaches so far, even into the worlds of Bia. Like it's explained in the summary of what the Baal Shem Tov teaches, that's brought down in this Likutei Torah for 3 parshas that we spoke about earlier. Shebetlas Almid, in the 3 worlds, Shem Bri Yitzir Asiyah the clothes. This is talking about the worlds of Bri Yitzir Asiyah, not the way they are referring to Bri Yitzir Asiyah as they are ordinarily referred to, the way they are lower than Atzilus, but rather when we're talking about Bri Yitzir Asiyah, the way they are used as terms to encompass the whole Seder Ishtalshus. And we said that that's the level. There's Bria the Klolas, the Hainu Adam Kadben, or Oil Masein Sof. The world of Bria, the way it's in the general Seder Ishtalshus, that goes on the world of Ak, or in general, the Ein Sof worlds. And the world of Yitzira of Klolas is the level of Atzilus. And then Bria, Yitzira, Asiyah, and top of page you test, the worlds of Bria, Yitzira, Asiyah. That is considered Asiyah the Klolas. Since it's called Asiyah the Klolos, it gives a little bit more of an understanding of why they are called Mata. Because concerning the worlds of Bia, it says everything called by my name, I have created it, I have formed it, and also I have made it. Af hifsik. So the word af in that pasuk makes a separation between Asiya and Bria Yitzira. So too, in the Bia HaKlalim, which is Ak, Atzilus, versus Bia, there is also this af that separates, because Bria Yitzira Asiya Nikra Alma the Prudo. Because the worlds of Bia are called worlds of separation, because not like Atzilus, where Atzilus we say that Hashem is one, both with the Oidus and the Kalim. In Bri Yitzir Asiyah, where it's the beginning of created beings, there's already a Yesh, so it's already separated from the Eibishter. So because of that, since Bri Yitzir Asiyah, which is in general called Asiyah, the Klolos, the general world of Asiyah, there's the word Af to indicate it's separate, it's something not like and not connected to the previous world. And that is the mata, that is the level of below that the Ein Sof, we say, reaches so far below, even to the worlds of Bri Yitzir Asiyah, that is under the term Af, that the Af separated. Okay, line 4 on page you test. Amnam in this idea this idea is not just concerning the worlds and malachim, but also concerning neshamas. That neshamas are also in this type of level of being called mata and separated and removed, because the neshamas, as we said before, are primarily not from the world of Atzilus. They're not neshamas to Atzilus. It's a rare neshama that's a neshama to Atzilus. In general, the neshamas are from Bia. So he says in line 6, the Hainu Roiv neshamas, the majority, neshamas, Shem neshamas, the Bri Yitzir Asiyah, Gam Heim, Nechlolim, Beinyonim Sheboim La'achrei Hafsik, the Afosisiv. Also, the neshamas of Bia are included in those matters that come after the separation of the word Af, that Af was made. So in other words, it's not just the worlds are in a level that Af hifstika inyan and it's low. It's not just the malachim which come from chitzonius that the Af separates and makes it be considered low, but even the neshamas are part of that level of bia, and the Af separates them as well. Now, The Rebbe goes on further in exploring the mata that we find in Bri Yitzirasi. Says in line 8, this was an addition to what we just now said, to the mata of everything in the world of Bri Yitzirasi. There's also the drawing down the light in a way of descending even lower than what we spoke about in general, coming down to the worlds of Bri Yitzirasi. But the idea behind this is what we find that's lower even than the general hamshach of the earth into Bri Yitzirasi. Like the Maimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe continues over there in Oisid Gimel. Is to change the scent of the light in the worlds of Yah from one level to another level and multiple levels. In such a way that the light becomes concealed and covered from one level to another level. So it's not just Bria gets a low oil, Yitzira gets maybe a lower oil, and Nasiya gets a lower oil. But in those worlds itself, there's further devolutions, further concealments, further lowerings of the oil. Until the light, when it reaches the worlds of the constellations, the worlds of the mazolas, it becomes coarsened, it becomes more materialized, and so on, more a lower and lower type of oil because it has to engage with lower aspects. So there's the oil in general and beyond. And then in that oil of Biyah, the way it needs to engage with the lower parts of Biyah. Therefore, all the hashpats and all the revelations in this low world, in this physical world, why they have to go through different constellations and different mazolas. Like it says, and the sweetness of the crops is from the sun, and the megid gerish yirachim, and the sweetness of the barley is from the moon. Like it says, there's no grass down here below that has no mazel above that like hits on it. In other words, directs it, it forces it, and tells him grow. It comes from a godly light and life force that flows through these constellations and through these mazols. So now the Rebbe is going to explain more about this life force that flows down to them and the mazel that's involved in them. And there's two components over here. Everything in this world, first of all, needs to be created yesh me'ayin. And once it's created yesh me'ayin, it needs to be animated. It needs to be given chayis. So the Rebbe is going to bring out how the Oren Sof comes down so far below that even to give chayis to the physical blade of grass, through the galgalim, through the mazolas, etc. And we can see this from the statement that we said before, that and the Rebbe will bring from what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that the very fact that it says that this mazel tells it to grow, that means that the mazel is not there to create it, because you can't tell something to grow if it hasn't been created. Rather, the function of the mazel is to translate and transform and bring down the godly life force in the existing blade of grass, that it should now continue to grow, though it was already created. Let's see inside what the Rebbe is going to say about it. Line 22. It means to say, seemingly it's not understood. The Bishlema ben Agel is Havas Ha'esav, she's Havabai Masim Hazagashmi. This makes sense concerning the coming into being of the grass that should come into being in such a way that's appropriate for the physical world. So obviously you want to bring a physical grass into being, and it needs to be able to function on the physical plane. It's understood that you need to have the mazel to act as an intermediary to transform and translate and to lower the godly life force so it should be appropriate for this world. But concerning the growth of the grass, once the grass already exists and now you want it to grow, like the Alter Rebbe explains and is medayik in his blushing in the Keres HaKodesh. Top of page mazel that hits on it and says grow means the fact that it says that it's telling you to grow. Obviously, it's obviously talking about after the grass already sprouted. It doesn't say the mazel is knocking on it and saying that it should blossom and grow from nothing to something. It's saying that it should grow from being small to big. Yitzmak Alter Rebbe says before it sprouted forth. Is who does every single mazel address, every single grass specifically. So the Rebbe says, so since we're talking about the growth of the grass, we're not talking about the creation. The creation I can understand where the Odin Sof needs to function through the mazel, but why, when it comes to the growth, does it have to go through the mazel in the movement? Mazel's understood. Why do you need to have this function to come about through the mazel that should, since it's already created? From this, that Friedrich Rebbe explains in his Maimer, should be since in the descent of the light, it becomes coarsened, it becomes materialized. Has every type of flow of godly life force into this world. Not just concerning the coming into being and existence of a man, but also concerning its growth. Is only through the constellations and the mazolas, because everything has to go through them to bring down the Ein Sof into the world. So we see another level, another descent in how Ein Sof comes down into the world. Then the Rebbe concludes what the Friedrich Rebbe says about how awesome this descent is. The Maimer continues, this is a great descent. The fact that godliness comes down so concealed. The many concealments and coverings of the chain descent of the worlds of Yah, still can come down into an external type of ashpah and a physical type of ashpah. And moving, therefore, from this is understood. Since it's a great descent, in this matter, it's a wonder that the infinite light is a great pella, it's a great chiddush, that the infinite light of the Eibshter comes down below to know. Any questions before we go on?
Yeah. There is a little confusion here.
Okay.
Because at certain point I saw that the transition from nothing to something is not controlled by the mazalot, but by something else. But at the end, the last
nothing to something. You're right. That's exactly the point that the Alter Rebbe is saying, that the mazalos are not really the ones that are transitioning it from nothing to something. The haraya, it says grow. If you tell you to grow, that means it's already in existence. So the mazel's function is not to create yesh me'ayin.
But it seems that at the end of the keta, he says the opposite, that even that is from the mazalot.
Everything, after all is said and done, has to go through mazalos. you could say it's similar to what it says. There's an expression brought down of Chassidus, memale mahave b'koyach hasoyv. Even though we know that creation yesh me'ayin, for example, comes from Soiv Kolamin, Soiv Kolamin is still too infinite and too removed to directly come in contact with the item that it has to be mahava. So even the hishavus that's attributed to Soiv Kolamin still has to go through Mamal Kolam. So in a similar vein, we're not totally taking the mazel out of the picture, but the mazel is more of a derech ma'ivir when it comes to the hishavus than when it comes to chayes.
So the Tabut itself is directly from Or and Sof?
That's what we're saying. It's not directly from Or, but it's attributed to Or. In other words, there's more of the iron sof nicker in the hishavus because yesh ma'ayin is something that can only be done b'koyach ein sof.
Sure.
Just like we say that there's more of soiviv that's recognizable in the hishavus than in the chayis that comes after the hishavus. The chayis that comes after the hishavus we attribute it to Mamal Kolamin, but the hishavus itself, yesh ma'ayin, we attribute it to soiviv kolam. But even though we're attributing it to Soiv Kolamin, the Soiv cannot meet with the physical thing directly. It's impossible. This is infinite. This is finite. It's just going to blow it apart. So Soiv, even the power of Soiv still has to go through Mamal Kolam. So in a similar vein, it has to pass through the mazel as well. But that's not the primary function of the mazel. The primary function of the mazel is like the Rebbe's B'dayik, the growth is primarily where the mazel comes into its own.
Okay.
This is the source of idol worship because they started worshiping the models.
Yes, exactly. They also, and this is the way. I mean, in the physical sense, we see that the sun makes the food grow and so on and so forth. So therefore, they attributed divine powers to it. But since that wasn't the source of the divine powers, the mazel is only a transformer to bring this awesome power into the physical world. So that was the beginning of a disorder, correct? Now he's going to take it down a further step. Again, taking from the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer to take down a further step, where we see the Ein Sof Lamata Mata Den Tachas. Though the descent that we spoke about before, how even when it comes down into the world of Bia, it needs to go down even lower and become enclosed in the Mazolos Hagashrim to be able to create, give life to even a blade of grass. Despite that, even this most lowest type of descent. They are only in the levels of Kedusha, or at least in levels that have a connection with Kedusha. So even though you might say that the Mazolas and the Galgalim are not Kedusha itself, but they still are close to Kedusha, and they have, if you will, Kedusha in a more revealed way within them. Therefore, and therefore it's not the lowest type of descent. The lowest type of descent that he's going to bring over here is obviously something that's completely beyond the pale, something that goes beyond Kedusha total. Concerning this, he continues in the Maimer. Yes, there's even a greater descent. Comes down the multiple constrictions and concealments and coverings. Till there could be something that's the total opposite from godliness completely. That they come down the Ein Sof even into something that can totally forget on the Eibishter, heaven forbid. And how much more so, the way it comes down to Klippa Sitrach, top of page Chaf Aleph, that it will say, like we had in last week's Haftarah, to me is the Nile, and I made myself. That's total opposite of truth. So now he's going to elaborate upon the truth that it is. Again, this is all quote from the Friedrich Rebbe's mind.
It's a denial of the denial.
The truth is that Yaakov bench Pari. That's brought down in Medrash Tanchuma, and Rashi says it on the words Vayiborach Yaakov v'Syeparoi u'Bameber. Rashi says, what type of bracha did Yaakov give Pari? He gave him a bracha that the Nile should rise up towards him, since Eretz Mitzrayim needed to have its waters from the river Nile. It didn't have much rainfall, so therefore, when the Nile went up, so that was what sustained and helped irrigate the crops. So by Pari having this great bracha, this is really a flow of supernal good that came down. So what happened instead? Pari was the king of constraints and boundaries. That's why it's called Melech Mitzrayim, meaning he is the ultimate boundary, ultimate constraint, ultimate limitation and concealment. Not only was he not thankful, he was the opposite of being aware and appreciative. Instead, not only did he not give credit where credit is due, but he said, to me is the Nile, I made myself. In other words, he proclaimed himself a god by the fact that the Nile rose towards him. It's the total opposite of the truth, because it all came from the age. This is again an end of a quote from the Friedrich Rebbe's mind. Now the Rebbe is going to elaborate on what the Friedrich Rebbe said. The idea behind this is the gam also there, the life force and vitality of the Eresof comes into Klip Sitrach. It says that you give life to all. Therefore, it must be that Klip Sitrach also get their chayas from the Eibush. Ella, but how does it work? How does it come down? Chayas, the Mesabim, Misgashim, the chayas descends and becomes coarsened and materialized and flows through the constellations of mazolos until till there could be something that's the opposite of godliness. Now, in being the opposite of godliness, there are different levels of being the opposite of godliness. In addition to this, the Negamda, which is also something that's the opposite of godliness, could be in such a way that he doesn't know his master, and therefore he doesn't intend to rebel against him. He's just like the opposite of godliness. He's going his own way. He doesn't care about God. He doesn't intend to rebel against God. Then he's not as unappreciative. Then he is not as thankless. But then there's a lower level than someone that is just not being appreciative. But he knows his master. He knows the Eibishter. And despite that, he rebels against him. To say that to me, the Nile, I made myself. Then he's doing the opposite of being appreciative. It's not just he's not being appreciative, but instead he is taking credit for something that someone else did. That's why the Maimer, when it wants to bring out about how low the earlier stuff came down, it brings the example from Pari. Though he knew that the rising of the Nile towards him is because of Yaakov and his brach, the Kalbach was still in all. He was the opposite of being appreciative. Lias Yeshem Mitzias, to be a Yesh, to be a Mitzias. Lloyd asked me not just concerning himself, to even say that the Nile is mine, and I made myself to proclaim himself a God.
But in the psukim, it seems that Paro says